Hello, today we're going to cover a fascinating topic, the knowledge and wisdom of the oak tree and what that means and its place in history and sovereignty and all of the above. so, so why is the oak tree one of the most sacred symbols in Irish history? From kingship to chieftains to sovereignty, from language to Brehon laws to the organisation structures of the Gaelic order, the oak tree plays a huge part in the fabric of the spiritual landscape of Ireland. All important inaugurations, ceremonies, even judgments happened in the presence of an oak tree. But the question is why? Why did that happen, right? The oak tree created the Bronze Age and advanced human consciousness and evolution, right? So, like, why do I plant trees? Like, I grow them, right? I grow oak trees. So, why do I grow oak trees? Why do I give so many oak trees as gifts to weddings, newborns, funerals, and as family trees, special occasions? And why did I give a gift of an oak tree to the chief of the Choctaw Nation? So many people know about the generosity of the Choctaw Nation during the famine in Ireland when they gave money and stuff over to help people here, even when they were going through a very bad time themselves. So when the chief of the Choctaw Nation came to Ireland, I gave him a gift of an oak tree. I gave a gift of an oak tree as a physical and symbolic gift, right? For many different reasons, but one of them was to symbolically grow a friendship, the roots of a grow like the roots to grow a friendship for generations to come, right? And we're going to get into all of that and what it means to me, right? And also, there was a thing called the Archangel Project where they're working with the Woodland League, and they were restoring the DNA of Native Irish, the most important ancient oak trees in Ireland. They were repopulating the DNA of the oak trees of Ireland. And out of this, I was given two of them, right? Two of the most sacred trees you could have. And I'm going to explain why I gave these as gifts to weddings, believe it or not. Even though they're very sacred to me, they're like for me, I'll explain the teachings of the oak tree, why I gave them as weddings, because for me, they're so important, the oak tree, that it was better for me to give them when two whole families looking after the tree to grow properly as the family tree. And also for me, the oak tree is that important that I want many people looking after them. Um, the Bronze Age, how did the oak tree create the Bronze Age, right? So the oak tree produces the purest oxygen, right, for us to breathe in. That's why we have a spiritual relationship with the oak tree. But also it pulls in so much carbon as well, right, into it. That when you burn the oak, it burns at such a high temperature that it create that smelting, that we were able to create the Bronze Age from that. The Bronze Age came from the smelting due to the heat and temperature from the oak tree, right? And that advanced, let's say, farming tools for agriculture, weapons, fortifications, permanent settlements as well, like housing and all that kind of stuff. It set up trade networks where we first started documenting different trade things and stuff like that, writing. So it just evolved a lot of, let's say, consciousness and stuff like that, right? So these have played a bigger part than most people realize, right? So I'm going to get into natural leadership. So the oak tree is seen as a leadership. So everyone uses a symbol of leadership and all of this. Why? Why do they do that, right? Let's have a great chat. So when you put an acorn into the ground, right? I now see it as plugging it in, right? It's like I see the soil as an intelligent format. I see it nearly like a computer, right? So you can program it, change it, all that kind of stuff. I'll explain that further later on. But when you put an acorn into the ground, right, the way I look at it now is like I look at the acorn like an intelligent memory stick, right? So when you put the memory stick into the ground, right, it changes the formations of soil. So it puts intelligence into the soil and teaches the soil how to work properly in order to turn that small little acorn into a massive powerhouse of a tree and what that tree can do for society, for life, for the 5,000 species on it, insects, all this, that life that it creates home for all the birds, all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, it's what happens with other plants and why it was always seen as a natural chieftain, leadership, king, and all that kind of stuff. When you put the oak tree in the ground, right, straight away the whole environment changes, right? All the other trees straight away start giving nutrition to the oak tree, right? Straight away, the whole lot of them do, right? Because they know that when the oak tree grows, that the oak tree will actually protect the rest of them and give back to the rest of them, right? So like, that's where we get the understanding of natural leadership, all of that. So the oak tree is the most giving tree, right? Produces the purest oxygen, all of the above. But even with all the insects, caterpillars, all of that, the birds that come in, the life that come in, it creates life to thrive for all other plants, right? So in nature itself, it's a teaching of nature. The oak is the king of the forest. All the other trees benefit from an oak being planted around it. And again, underneath the ground, through the mycelium, through mycorrhizal fungi, all of that, um, they actually give all their nutrition to the oak tree, right? So the oak tree then acts as like a, let's say, like a thyroid, right? So all the nutrition goes on, all the nutrition and information goes into the oak, then it goes back out, right, into the environment, and everything else grows stronger because the oak tree itself, right, it'll actually hit water. No matter where you plant an oak tree, it'll hit water. It'll hit water and drag water up into that environment, right? And it'll purify the whole soil of the area, which everything thrives from. So you can, let's say, areas that are barren lands and stuff like that, that's where you should be putting an oak tree. It'll bring it back to life. Some people think, oh, I can't plant an oak tree there because the land is crap. No, the tree is designed to reprogram soil in order to help the entire environment, right? And help the entire environment thrive. And that's where we get an understanding of, let's say, the hierarchy of nature. That's what Om and all that would be. How nature communicates in a way that it has its own leadership roles. Each tree has a different role to play and stuff. So you can get into a deep organization structure in nature, and when we bring that into our lives, we can learn so much from it. We can even learn so much from the patterns of it, right? And again, we'll get into this now, right? So the oak tree sustains more life than most other trees, right? The biodiversity powerhouse. It will always hit water, always, no matter what, it will hit water, right? So it'll bring water back into that environment, right? It purifies soil, purifies water. It's amazing what it can do to reprogramming soil, right? Absolutely incredible, right? It's a carbon storage then as well. Under Brehon law, trees had rights, and planting an oak tree was not just seen as agriculture, it was an act of spirit woven into the law, cosmology, and identity, right? The oak was seen as the king among trees. So the trees themselves see the oak as the king, right? So you're strengthening whole environments, ecosystems by bringing oak back. And that's why I plant lots of oak. I bring it all back, right? And I try to promote other people giving it back, planting them back. And yeah. So the place within the earth was to invite strength, wisdom, and endurance into the land, because these can grow for a very long time. Like the Brian Brew oaks can grow for thousands of years, you know. So it's endurance, and what they do for all environment structures is amazing. So the knowledge of the oak itself evolved the oldest legal system in Europe, which is Brehon law, right? That people today still dream of and fantasize about its fairness and its the sheer beauty of it. And I love all this, right? The beauty of it is absolutely fantastic. The Brehon then was the judge, right? So the Brehon was the ancient judge central to the system of law, not just in physical matters but in spiritual matters also. The Brehon was the backbone of spiritual sovereignty, right? So to me, like I know people talk about druids, this, that, the other. To me, it's all about the Brehon. The Brehon is the bringer of balance back in. That's why I've been to different martial arts and different things. So yes, balance in law, but law is everything. Law is the world that we live in too as well, and how to bring back balance in absolutely everything, because things can go out of whack, and how to bring back in balance. And let's say when I was doing the thing, messages and water at the lock, right, getting everyone surrounding the lock, holding hands, I was looking at, let's say from a Brehon perspective, how do you bring balance back into this in order for people to thrive? Again, it's like bringing the wisdom of the oak in for the whole environment to thrive, right? So the oak tree strengthens the land, and the knowledge of the oak tree strengthens human consciousness, right? So if you really want to dumb down a nation, what you do is you get rid of cut down all the oak trees, right, and get rid of its teachings, language, and all of that. And that's why in Ireland they got rid of the teachings of they got cut down all the oak trees, right? Not all of them. There's a lot left, but they got rid of the teachings of it, which is very important, right? That's where they try to get rid of the Irish language and all of that. The teachings of that is vital for human consciousness, right? And that's where there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom encoded into it, right? And we're going to get into all of that, right? So when we look at the Gaelic order, people look at the chieftainships of Ireland, all of that, right? So in the Gaelic order, trees were seen as deeply symbolic for law, tradition, and community, right? Under Brehon law, there was a hierarchy of trees under perceived importance. So the oak, hazel, holly, and yew were the nobles akin to high-ranking leaders central to the community development, right? So each tree had a role, just like each person, contributing to the balance and order of the entire system, right? So in essence, the Gaelic order reflected the natural hierarchy of trees and the natural hierarchy of nature, where each tree and person had the respective place in the grand scheme of nature and society, right? So the whole system was designed upon nature, right? So these were people where, let's say, planting oak trees was seen as honoring all of life, not just all of life, because what we breathe, it helps evolve our brains too, because we're breathing in pure oxygen, all of that kind of stuff, right? And it's deeply connected with sovereignty too as well, right? I'm going to get into that. So an interesting question to ask is like, who gave us the tree? Who gave us the tree, right? You're getting into divinity, and they're here to help restore nature or ecosystem or planet or consciousness. That's what they're here for, right? So the old systems, when people look at, let's say, Druid wisdom or anything like that kind of stuff, Brehon, because of the effect of the oak tree and how it affects the whole consciousness of whole environments and whole ecosystems and all of the above, right? Like, for example, say, if I planted an oak grove, right, and an oak grove, and an oak grove, the biggest oak trees in a circle, right? So that will enhance the whole system for a very long while to thrive. It'll all thrive, and you'll see all the nature coming towards the oak grove as it, because it's seen as nature's king in a way, right? So that's why we had all these ritual sites on inside an oak grove. That's where Brehon judgments were made, all of the above, right? Because nature there was thriving, so it was like that's where we get the original, let's say, churches and stuff like that. So the even inside in the church today, all the what's it called, the pillars inside the church represent trees and the grove, and that's where all that sort of stuff goes back to, right? So that when the people who planted these trees, right, and the understanding of the Ohm Grove and Oak, and people say Druid, Brehon, all of that kind of stuff. So when they planted them, it wasn't just about healing human consciousness and environment and ecosystem. They believed that was the, let's say, God's work, right? As in, like, healing what they believed it was healing the divine. You're healing the divine when you do all this kind of stuff, right? That's really, in essence, what it all goes back to, right? Um, yeah, and there's places in Ireland as well where you've oak groves. They weren't just about um, let's say, ritual, ceremony, and all. They were also, like, before we had hospitals, they were birthing places. So there's places in Ireland where there's birthing stones in the middle of oak groves. And then when a child was being born, because they didn't have hospitals, and think of it, when you're born in a hospital, you're born in a traumatic environment because there's trauma going on everywhere. But here, you're born in the middle of an oak grove, right? So the purest oxygen is being bred into you, and they believed with harps and stuff, it was like coding. It was like that was like a royal birth in Ireland a long time ago. And if you think of it, like, different trees produce different oxygens and do have different effects in your brain, right? So if you're ever in UCC and outside the library, there's these two big pine trees, right? But these and there's a yew tree as well, and these trees actually improve memory. When you breathe them in, they improve memory. And these trees would be associated in the Ogham calendar then with November and Christmas, So that's why they're associated with ancestral wisdom and all that kind of stuff, because it's about memory. They enhance your brain to remember and stuff. So different trees like the oak enhance your spirituality and enhance the spirituality of the soil too as well, right? And it grows everything properly, and you can learn so much from studying the actual soil as well, right? Um, so when we look at, even today, let's say, globalism, we look at globalism today, right? We look at how much globalism is blatantly disrespect for Irish sovereignty, right? So these were the very same families of people who actually who destroyed Irish history, right? Destroyed Ireland, rewrote Irish history to manipulate people, to not allow people to learn all of this stuff. Because if you're pretending to be a sovereign, like a king, pretending to be doing it wrong, you have to hide the understanding of the natural structures of leadership and all that kind of stuff, and hide people from knowing that. So that's why they destroyed Irish history, right? The company that chopped down the trees were called the Hollow Sword Blade Company, right? And the Hollow Sword Blade Company, if you look at the Gera near near Gugambara, the Gera was a wet forest, right? Oak forest, right? And it was alluvial forest. And those trees were purifying the water before it came into Cork. It was very important, but they chopped down the trees, and those trees were used to build the British House of Lords, right? So that's where they went, and to the height of disrespect, all of that. So we need to plant them back. But these trees as well, because sovereignty itself is a connection with the land, right? A massive connection with the land that we live. That's what true sovereignty is, and we need to reconnect people to it, right? So as you plant a tree, you're cultivating your own sovereignty, and you really are developing a relationship with land fully. I fully have that, 100%, right? And that's why I love all these, and I love giving them gifts to people, because it's like reconnecting people with their own sovereignty. It does not read like it. That's what it is, right? And the oak trees have given me put me on an interesting journey of life. The amount of people that I've met and weddings and stuff, bringing them to, and it's interesting when I give them to a wedding, and at first they're like, what? But then about a week or two later, they always come back with an amazing story. Wow, that was the nicest gift, when the penny drops. When they all realize the beauty of it, right? So we need to get back planting trees and strengthening the soil and strengthening our own environment, our own strength of consciousness, all of the above. That's what I'm into. That's me. And it's like the breath and bringing back in the breath of life, right? So just to give you an interesting understanding of the oak tree and its important significance with sovereignty, leadership, chieftainship, kingship, all of that, because this is the natural leader, right? People talk about harmony with nature and stuff. This is it. This is where this is the importance of it. So these are truly are sacred, right? You can make different teas from the trees and improve your brain's ability to remember, and all sorts of things, you know. So again, thank you for listening. And this is only just an introduction, but what the oak tree can do to the soil is incredible, and whole ecosystems. So again, when you plant the oak tree into the ground, it changes the whole ecosystem, and the whole ecosystem works to benefit the tree, because the tree then grows and protects and benefits everything else around it, you know, perfecting soil, doing so much. So in nature, then the nature is nature, right? But nature honors the oak, and that's where we got the understanding of leadership and true sovereignty and all that kind of stuff, right? So the oak is very important. So I hope that explains to you why I give gifts of oak trees to people and why the oak tree was always seen as sacred in Ireland, and it still is. It still is, right? So we need like this. When acorns fall, I'd like to get everyone collecting them, planting them out your back garden, seed box, planting them, and giving them as gifts to people. It's free, but it's a really cool way of repopulating and reconnecting people, especially if you have kids as well, right? We need to get them planting trees. They love it, absolutely love it, right? And we can teach you a lot more, but this is just a start to get you introduced. So any questions, please ask. I'm only happy and delighted to teach whatever I can, you know. So the oak trees are very important to me, absolutely important, vital important, the most important thing. Thank you.